chase what you want. Don't just take what you get. Because a lot of times that's what we do. We end up just acquiescing. We acquiesce to the life that we are given, that's available, that's in front of us, as opposed to curating and designing something that's much more authentic to us. A lot of times we're so fearful of rejection that we don't even make an attempt at something. We don't even try. Being bold is way more important than being smart. It really is boldness that's the secret sauce. It's not how much talent you have. It's not about how smart you are or how pretty you are. It's about just going for it.
Bigger, better, bolder. I'm not sure people want to be bigger after the holidays, but okay.
Bigger, it's not, that doesn't necessarily mean bigger physically. It can be bigger in personality.
I could use a little height.
Yeah. How tall are you?
I'm like 5'10". Okay. Shoes on.
Yeah.
Like on a good day where maybe after I've been in space, I'm 5'11".
Maybe if you improve your posture, you can maybe get a little bit more.
Is that how it works? Yeah. So I at first I was like, oh, whatever, boldness is a skill. But then I realized that you're actually the perfect person to teach boldness as a skill, because it is in large part how you've gotten a lot of the things that you've gotten in your life. And I remember when I first met you, you were like, you just kind of go for what you want, but I guess you weren't always that way.
Well, it's not that I think maybe what I think that what the problem is that people assume that you're either born bold or you're not. And I believe, and I really believe this, is that it's an acquired skill that anyone can get better at. And so I may have had a little bit more boldness than, let's say, somebody else. But like, I think that what happened in my life, and I'm sure it happens, something gives you a kernel of like confidence or a reason that you want to be bold, and it kind of goes from there. So for me, or in general, I should say, with boldness, I kind of use the analogy of fitness. I know you hate to talk about fitness on this.
Yeah, it's okay. But as long as this is not actually a wellness tip.
I'm not going to give you a squat routine or a lunge routine, I promise. But what I am going to do is give you an analogy, okay? So if you want to get better at fitness or you want to get stronger, right? Any muscle, you have to be consistent and go in the gym and work at it, right? And when you stop, it atrophies. And I kind of think of boldness the same way. I think with boldness, it's a skill that, or a muscle, that if you want to get better at it, if you're not naturally inclined to be bold, you have to practice it. You got to be more consistent, and you do little things daily to make yourself more bold, that muscle. And if you stop doing it, it atrophies, just like anything else. So if you want to get good at karate, fitness, Spanish, whatever, you have to be doing something constantly to get better. And so I don't think you necessarily have to be someone who was just naturally, born bold or naturally born a certain way. I think that we have the ability to create that in us. And that's my point.
I think that's largely true. It's funny, and I know this to be true because I've done this myself and for a lot of different skills. I'll tell someone like, oh, yeah, I used to be really shy. And they're like, yeah, right. I'm like, no, really. And they'll be like, no, your version of what's really shy is someone else's version of normal or outgoing. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I really couldn't even look people in the eye. And at school, I wanted to be invisible. And they're like, what? Like, people don't really even necessarily believe that because I'm so different now.
Well, not only that, you created an entire life that you have to be talking to people and engaging with people.
Yeah, it's kind of a job that you don't get when you're shy. A shy person.
Exactly.
Generally.
And what the backstory is also, it's not even the interview itself, right? It's to have the boldness to go after those interviews, right? And so you can't be shy. And then your other stuff that you've done, it's all about networking and socializing. So that doesn't make sense with the whole shy thing.
Right. Basically, every job, business, industry that I've been in the last 20 years requires me to be bold, confident, outgoing, and well-connected, which when I was a kid, I was none.
Exactly. Yeah. It's honestly the antithesis.
Yeah, it is. But I think this is an important point because a lot of people would do well. And I know I still get these questions on Feedback Friday, like, how do I just build up the guts to get what I want? When I was younger, it was always dating related. Now it's more like, how do I get a promotion or set up this business or ask for something that I want to do? And part of it is what you call the good enough trap, which I think is really insightful. And I think it's the quote, it's like, the good is the enemy of the great or something like that. Just having something where you're comfortable is the killer of ambition. And I think it was Nicholas Nassim Taleb who said something along the lines of the most addictive thing in the world is heroin and a steady paycheck. I'm butchering the quote.
Or you could just even say something like, golden handcuffs at a law firm, right? Because you make enough money. When you get too comfortable or things are good enough, it gives you the permission to not push yourself
and rock the boat
and to do anything about it. That's why you are kind of butchering it, but I get the point. You
didn't
which
have
means
to highlight that.
Well, no, I'm just kind of, that's what I do. But I do believe that is the problem. So like actually good enough or comfortable or like being okay is probably the worst nightmare that someone can have for like really getting the life that they really want. And so what I say is that, and you can laugh, which you probably would, but I say on my book title, like chase what you want, don't just take what you get. Because a lot of times that's what we do. We end up just acquiescing. We acquiesce to the life that we are given, that's available, that's in front of us, as opposed to curating and designing something that's much more authentic to us. And if my entire point of doing this and writing the book was to tell people this is not rocket science. You don't have to be the most talented. Actually, don't have to be that smart. You don't have to be anything. But what you do need to be is have to have the desire to kind of to put yourself out there and ask. Because you and I talk about this a lot on like in life, our friendship, right?
You mentioned you don't have to be that smart. And it's funny that you say that because I think smart people are really good at coming up with systems and overthinking things and not doing anything. And some of the smartest people that I knew, especially when I was working as a lawyer, were always paralyzed with indecision, would almost never take actual risk.
Right.
Because, which is funny because the whole law thing is very like risk averse in many ways.
Yes.
But it was also a metaphor for their whole life. It was, don't embarrass yourself. I remember friends being like, don't go ask that person out. What if she says no? And I'm like, are you actually my internal dialogue? This is not what you're supposed to be telling me. And whole groups of guys would be like, you should definitely not do that. And it's like a stranger where if they reject me, it makes absolutely no difference. They're like, you're going to feel bad for months if you get rejected.
No, 100%. Yeah. But this is kind of like a reframe, right, for your brain, because this is the thing, right? I did this TED talk actually, where my whole hypothesis, right, was be bold, not smart, because bold is a secret sauce, not intelligence, right? That doesn't say that you can't be smart and bold or bold and smart, but the secret sauce of how you get from point A to Z, depending on what country you're in, right, is being bold. Because and this is what I was saying before, you and I have spoken about this just on our friendship. Like we've had hours and hours of talks about all the bubbleheads and bozos that we know.
Yeah, it's a favorite topic.
Right, it's our favorite topic in the world, of people who are way less than even mediocre. Way less than mediocre. But they had one thing that other people didn't have. They had audacity. They had the audacity to believe in themselves, or to go after it, whatever that is. That's the only difference between the people who are so successful and people who are like not, who are barely getting by, is they had the audacity to believe in that and just kind of, go for it over and over again and be bold, be bold. And I could give you a million different examples of that, that's been like documented or just in you and I knowing people like that. So my entire premise of this all is that it's not rocket science. It really is just a reset and a reframe of how you perceive yourself and how you show up in the world. And then from that, you can literally change your life by just doing something as simple and as bold as asking for what you want and, putting yourself in that situation, not just accepting what you get, but also not just being kind of a passive passenger in your own life.
Passive passenger. You're going to have to work on that. You're going to have to work on that for the presentation. It is something that you wrote in your book that was quite interesting and obviously super simple, is that personality traits can be changed over time if you take actions specific to those traits. And I am a firm believer in that as well. And it seems obvious in retrospect, but I think a lot of people don't truly believe that. They really think they're sort of stuck with their nature. And when you believe that, then it's really hard to think, well, I can change what might be a core part of my identity over time.
So I think that So I think that this is going to be, it could be a controversial topic, but I mean, there's a lot of science behind the fact that as you do something over and over again enough, it becomes a new habit habitually, you do change the neuroplasticity in your brain, right? So I believe, in this research documenting, even I talk about this in my book, you can tweak and change your personality. I mean, you may have a baseline, right, that you're always comfortable at.
Right. Okay.
through habits and different routines and things that you're doing over and over again, it changes what you do and how you act just by the sheer act of doing it over and over again.
Yeah, I can't remember. I just did an interview recently. It's essentially, since your brain is plastic, you can, well, like any muscle, work out certain areas of your brain. And the way that you act also influences the way that people treat you, which then reinforces the new way that you're acting. So if you decide like, okay, I'm going to be friendly, which is harder, of course, easier said than done, but you manage to do that in certain context or whatever, like you force yourself to do that, people view you as this outgoing, friendly person, and they treat you as such, and then it reinforces your decision to be a friendly, outgoing person until you actually don't know the difference between faking it and...
Absolutely. Like, I hate this, fake it till you make it kind of nonsense.
It gets a lot of people in trouble.
It gets a lot, but I will say...
Theranos.
Yes, yes, exactly, right? That's a huge... Yes, that one. By the way, she's going to jail, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah, she is going to jail. See? Don't fake it till you make it.
Yeah,
you end up in federal prison.
But there's different levels and degrees, right? But I do believe that to be... Even though I hate that kind of terminology, the truth of the matter is it becomes like a ripple effect, right? Like you were saying. So, like, if you believe you're a certain way and then kind of go through life that way, there is like a reaction action, right? People are going to treat you differently. Therefore, you're going to be different. Like, if you go into a situation awkward, uncomfortable, like very, very kind of like meekish, it makes other people uncomfortable, right? Yeah. And so it becomes a back and forth versus if you come into the room with a big chest, kind of not that type of chest, but like very much like out there, confident, alpha. Yeah. People treat you very, very differently.
Alpha is such a gross term, but I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? I hate the... I mean, we can go through the fake it till you make it, alpha.
Yeah, pull out every personal self-help cliche.
Pet peeve.
And put them all in one place.
Exactly. What I'm saying, but what my point is that these are all just pet peeve, talking points. But what I was going to say is every action does have a reaction. And so if you walk into a room differently, like you were saying, you get the different response. But that isn't even what my point at all even was. I was just talking about what you were saying. I just think that in general, overall, the thing is to get from A to Z or A to B and to get the life slowly that you actually are trying to have. It's about the ask. It's about putting yourself in that situation, being a little bit more impulsive sometimes and not overthinking. Because the overthinking is so paralyzing. Sure. And you think of all the things that can go wrong versus if you're bold, you think of all the things that can go right. It's the same but different.
So I thought about this and where did I start to change my personality or start to build this skill as a kid? My mom would always feel really awkward. My mom doesn't ask for what she wants, right? She's just not that kind of person. She's like very passive a lot of the time, depending on the situation. So when I used to go buy video games, if I didn't like it, this store called Babbage's, which doesn't exist anymore, had a return policy. And I would be like, Mom, I want to take this back. And she hated doing that. So what she did is she made me do it. And so I'm, 10, 11, 12, going to the store, and I'm like, I don't want this game anymore. And without fail, the salesperson, depending on who it was, would be like, sorry, it's, sales are final. And then my mom would go, is that true? And I'd be like, it's not true. Your policy is... And they'd be like, well, no, not really. And my mom's like, well, what does it say on the receipt? And I would have to read the policy to this chump at Babbage's and be like, your receipt said, and they'd be like, okay, fine. Other employees there were really cool with it. It didn't matter. But I just thought, this is so funny. I'm this kid my mom loved it, right? She's like, my kid's giving this guy hell to try and return and exchange a video game. And I didn't know until I was an adult that the reason my mom made me do that was because she didn't want to do it herself. I thought she was trying to help me develop a skill, whatever, but no, she just didn't want to do it herself. So then as I got older and I started not getting things what I want or didn't, had a problem with something, or I would send back the food that arrives ice cold. And my mom's like, where did you learn to do that? I'm like, well, I don't know. You told me not to do that. My mom, meanwhile, would eat frozen frickin' soup.
Right. If
it was up to her.
It was that's my exactly. So this is the whole point. And I talk about a lot of these things, of course, in these examples in my book. But, so in a way, your mother actually taught you to be bold.
In a way, yeah. But not through example.
Not through example. but through practice.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want to do it. So then when you grew up, you're eating the nice hot soup and your mom's having the cold soup, basically, because she didn't want to practice that skill.
Right.
Which is to the point, right? Like, it can't just be something theoretical that you read about. You have to practice by doing it over and over again.
It makes me want to train my kids or teach my kids to do this stuff. Like, raise your hand when you know the answer. Ask for what you want. Tell people when you don't like something.
Well, that's exactly a good point, because my kids, that's another reason why I think it's really important to show your kids. And I try to role model that for my kids. And I think that that's a really big point that you just made, because I don't want my kids to be okay with in general, in life. You know what I mean? That's
or just getting stepped on and not standing up for themselves, which is a real fine line between being bold. Like, a lot of people go, oh, I don't need to be bold. Well, okay, but where's the line for you? If you don't want to be bold, fine. But I feel like a lot of folks who don't want to be in that, who don't want to do that, they also end up being, not that if you're not bold, you're a doormat, but I think it's really easy to let people walk on you if you're not asking for what you want. Speaking up for yourself.
I agree. A lot of people ask me, like, well, doesn't boldness, it can have like a negative connotation, right? Because you could be called pushy, too aggressive, and these all have very negative, those are euphemisms that are pretty negative, right? Because I think also, as we're taught,
especially for women,
right? We were taught that we should be much more soft and more acquiescing, right? Not more accommodating, and not make waves. So when you see a woman who is actually like, you know what, actually, can I get salad dressing on the side, right? Like, can I get vegetables instead of potatoes? These are like simple examples. You see other people who are so like in shock and awe and like uncomfortable with the ask of that. Like, something as basic as that. Like, how do you go and after something big and ask for something big if you can't even get comfortable asking for something small, like sauce on the side? Have you thought about something as like basic as that? And then you teach these kids, like, when you have dinner with your children or you're going to a restaurant, you're like, oh, no, I'll just have frozen soup, like you were saying about your mom, right? To me, it's like you're doing a disservice, right? Like, I think that there's something wrong when you're putting something out there where it's not okay to design a life and stand up for what you want. I think that there shouldn't be a negative connotation with that. Especially if you're a parent, right? Like, you should be teaching your kids, if this isn't good, if this isn't right, you should stand up for it. If you want this, don't ask for that, or don't just accept. Don't just be okay with accepting just because it's easy. The path of least resistance is not always the best path.
I'm with you on this. This particular episode of the show is more self-helpy than most, which is, I think, totally fine. People do love this stuff.
People do, because they feel like they can maybe get even if they get one tactical, practical, actionable item that they can use in their life, it's worth something.
I think also people realize, at some level, most people realize that recovering from rejection is easier than trying to recover from regret. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's a huge pillar of my entire philosophy, right?
Yeah.
I'd much rather.
Are you mad that I took that point?
Yeah, you just like...
yeah, I could see the look in your face was like, I was going to drop that later.
I was going to say that, Jordan, and then you just took it from me. You snatched it right from my mouth. Yep. But yes, and I think it's actually very... Shame on you, Jordan. Shame on you.
You were gearing up for it.
I was, because it's a big one for me, right? It's a huge one for me.
But I like it. That's why I stole it.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
It's my show.
You know what they say? You know what they say when people steal things, right? Like, it's a form of flattery, I guess.
Is that what they say?
That's what they say.
Thieving is the greatest form of flattery.
Stealing.
IP theft.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's true though. Let me just step it back a little second. Yeah. So yes, Jordan took my line, which is rejection is always better than regret is always better. Yeah. Regret is always better than No, it's not. Rejection is always better than regret.
Still wrong.
Yes, it isn't. No,
I got you.
Not.
Okay, I got you.
I said it from the beginning. Jordan doesn't even know my line. Okay, I say
recovering from rejection is easier than recovering from regret. That's better.
I don't know. My line that I like better is rejection is always better than regret. It's simpler. It's cleaner.
It is cleaner.
And I'll tell you.
You should put that in a book.
I should.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm going to make a note of that to myself. Thank you. And make sure I don't give it to someone who'll steal it. But yes, and I believe this is, I wanted to say one thing before I even like go and drone on and on about this. This whole book, right? It's not, like I said at the beginning of this, it's not rocket science, right? I really wanted to write something that was very actionable for people, that it was me talking about how, not to say I'm not Elon Musk by any stretch, right? Or like Jeff Bezos. But what I'm saying, I'm not talking from a white ivory tower. What the whole point of this was to give people these like simple solutions, simple ways that they can just, elevate or better their life, even by like 1% or 2%, right? Like give them some like easy tools where they're not just okay with okay. And that is why, this is the whole purpose of it. And then that's why I talk about rejection versus regret, because a lot of times we're so fearful of rejection that we don't even make an attempt at something. We don't even try. And so we count ourselves out before we even give it a try. And so the reality is, like I say, and people can feel this, that if you try something and you don't get it, so what? It's going to hurt for how long? That rejection is going to sting for maybe a few hours, a day, maybe a week, depending on the size of this thing. Mm-hmm. But the idea of not even going after something and not even self-actualizing or using your potential at all, that regret lives with you forever. That's something that you always, that's a gutter feel, like a very gutter feeling that you have in your gut, right? Like you always will think about it. You'll always think, what if I did this, if I did that. Who wants to live in that way, right?
I did an episode on regret with Dan Pink. It was episode 625. We'll link to that in the show notes. I think a lot of what he says matches that. I mean, there's probably a little bit more in there because the whole episode is about regret, and it's Dan Pink, and he's a friggin' genius with that stuff. Yeah. One of the practicals that I loved.
Are you telling me that I'm not?
Let's move on. one of the practicals that I loved the most was the Batman effect and the alter ego. Can you take us through this? This is so good. Again, alter ego, sort of practical stuff that doesn't cost anything, that people can use right out of the box is always goes down well.
Well, alter ego is basically, something as simple as Beyonce. She has like Sasha Fierce is her alter ego. They did a bunch of.
Funny that Beyonce needs an alter ego.
She does. A lot of people do. And I'll tell you why. Because Beyonce is naturally very shy. If you met her in real life, if you met Beyonce in real life, she's extremely shy. She probably won't look you in the eyes. She's very, very quiet. She's not what you see when she goes on the stage. Yeah, she's like the antithesis of what she really is when she performs.
Surprised to hear that.
But look at Britney Spears. Britney Spears, she's so awkward in real life and very also like nervous, anxious, shy. It's interesting, the people that you see who are usually that way in real life, they have to create this alter ego to be who they are when they go on stage and be these amazing performers. It's usually literally the opposite of who they really are inside. And the only way they can get the courage and the bravery to be that person is to create this Batman effect or alter ego. Like that's why, there's been a lot of studies.
Yeah, tell me about the Duckworth study.
Is that the Duckworth study was that they've had kids, the kids study, right? When the kids were wearing a cape when they were younger, it gave them the confidence and they were able to work longer, harder, persevere way more than the kids who didn't have the Batman cape or a cape of some kind, because they felt much more confident, self-assured. So it's this idea of this alter ego that you create so you can actually pursue and do the things that you otherwise wouldn't have the courage to do.
It sounds kind of ridiculous. I did a whole show about the alter ego with Todd Herman, episode 163. It's
I had him on my show too.
Yeah, well, fine. Okay. And episode 163, the Jordan Harbinger Show. But it's funny to hear how popular this is. I think the example you gave in the book was also, well, besides Beyonce here and Britney Spears, Posh Spice sort of has her, I mean, I guess her alter ego is probably Posh Spice. Is that?
Well, Posh is, you mean Victoria Beckham?
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise known as Posh Spice.
Otherwise known as Posh.
That's when I stopped paying attention to her. Yeah.
A lot of people have this alter ego, is what I'm saying. You can talk, like, most actors that you meet, honestly, in like the world today, like if you meet them, and look at Christian Bale, look at all these people who create characters that they can then perform, right? Mm-hmm. It's because they have to put themselves in a different mindset, a different frame of mind. And that's like taking it from one level, but you can take it down to like the granular level, which is with the kids and wearing the capes, or Posh Spice, or Sasha Fierce, Britney Spears, all of these people who want to create or be a different persona, like a different persona to achieve what they want to achieve, create these alter egos. And then the research that you're talking about is based around what happens with people not doing that versus like wearing that cape or doing that versus not. And the amount or the ability to stay focused on a task and persevere at a task while they had this alter ego is extraordinarily higher than when they didn't.
It's not surprising that a ton of athletes, performers use all this. I know one of the things that Todd teaches, he's always coaching athletes and things like that to use the alter ego effect. So for a deeper dive on that, 163, I love this exercise where you record your negative self-talk with the reasons that you can't do something, and then you play it back to yourself. But can you explain this? You play it back using your alter ego. This is kind of genius. Did you think of this, by the way?
Well, who else would think of it?
I don't know. I mean, you never know. A lot of input.
Well, it's about talking to. I don't even know which part.
Who else would think of this? I don't know.
No. By the way, it's actually a good question, because you know how this whole book situation works, right? You write a book, it doesn't come out for 2 years. Yeah. You forget what's even in the book. I kid you not. Like, I forget a lot of the things.
You might consider reading your own book at some point.
I mean, maybe I'll peruse through the book.
Yeah. Flip through it on the way to your next interview.
Flip through it. I think the point of that, what you're saying, what you're talking about is when you're talking to yourself, you're talking to yourself differently than how you see yourself. Is that the area you're talking about?
Well, what this was when you decide to go do something and you have this negative self-talk, say it all out loud and record it, and then play that tape back, but step into your alter ego as you explained it in the book and as Todd explained it in that podcast, and then argue against yourself.
You know what's really funny? Todd Herman was a person in my book who I used as actually one of my references.
Well, I believe
and
that.
You mentioned him in this thing, and like how he was on your podcast talking about this. Like
now I'm confused.
So Todd Herman, you remember I said, he's on my podcast, right. And you were like, good for you, haha, me too. Well, he also was someone that I used as someone, because he's a specialist in these things to like bounce stuff off of.
Oh, okay, got it.
So he helped me in this area.
Yeah,
that's what I was saying.
That
to you.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, this concept of playing your negative self-talk back to yourself out loud, I've never heard that before, and then arguing against yourself, essentially. So your alter ego would be like the angel on your shoulder being like, no, you can do this. What are you talking about? Because your alter ego would never accept that level. Right, it would never say that. And Martin Seligman, who's essentially one of the greatest sort of scientists, positive psychology researchers or scientists of our time, said that that's one of the things that successful people do who are really resilient is they find reasons to argue against negative thoughts. Not just negative thoughts, but rationale that's bad.
Well, yeah, I know what you're saying.
Or poor reasoning.
What I call what you're saying, though, is more about ways to reframe an idea. So you're not thinking about something in a certain way, or you're not allowing that negative talk to stop you from the start. So if you do those things and hear how you're saying it, you're coming back to it with a different like twist, where that becomes your new voice and your new talk and your new reframe.
I know a lot of people think self-acceptance, to your earlier point, means accepting a lesser life. For many, self-acceptance means rationalizing not doing something or not having been able to accomplish something. What is a better version of self-acceptance that can actually drive us forward?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say something about self-acceptance. I have this thing that I do talk about, the 3 Fs. Is that what you're referring to?
I don't know, actually. Go for it.
So I think a lot of times what we have things that get us stuck, and we don't know what to do with it. So we're stopped in our tracks, which doesn't allow us to propel forward in any direction that we want to do. So what I try to do is I create these 3 buckets, and I call it the 3 Fs, which is fix it, forget it, or farm it out. And the reason why I create these like different buckets is because then you know what to do with whatever that thing is that gets you stuck from moving forward at all. And once you figure out where to put it, that should give you the green light to then move forward. So, and so like a lot of times I use a silly example, of course, in my book. I talk about my nose. I think you were laughing at that with me.
I was, yeah.
Yes, of course. But I think it happens with a lot of things in life, right? Like we get really stuck and fixated on something that we believe is why we cannot get to what we want. Or whatever. It could be something silly, like I talk about, like we're laughing about, like I always hated my nose, so I never thought I would ever be able to get things that would involve like appearance stuff, right? Like wouldn't be able to do this or
not
that.
Not that bad. Yeah, not that bad.
You said yourself, not that bad.
You got to reframe that. You got to reframe the way you hear those.
But because I've reframed it and put it into a certain bucket, I'm not offended by that comment.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
But if I didn't, and if it kept me stuck now, and then I heard you say, "Well, no, it's not that bad."
Yeah, you'd be thinking about.
I would be like, "I'd be like, what the like? That's so rude.
Yeah.
How can he say that?" Like,
it was rude.
Oh my god, it was rude. But I've moved past it. Is my point. And the three buckets, like I said, one is fix it. So you either fix what it is that's really bothering you that you really can't get over. Like I could have fixed my nose.
I get it. Yeah.
You know,
go to the plastic surgeon.
Yeah. And got myself a nose job, like most other Jewish girls that we know, right? Or
oh man, I did not say it. Jennifer Cohen, everybody. Yeah. Cohen.
Well, I'm keeping it real here, guys. Mm-hmm. I could farm it out, right? That's why it's hard to like farm out my nose, but I can get someone else to fix it for me. That's the point, right? Or I could forget about it and put that in the bucket and not think about it. It is what it is. I'm not going to change it. Move on with my life, right?
Sure.
And so that's a silly, very superficial example. Yeah. But it could be any other example in business. A lot of times when we can't move forward, we get really stuck and paralyzed because something's not working in our structure or our business.
I do see that a lot. I do see a lot of entrepreneurs who get stuck being like, well, we don't know how to do this particular thing and we don't have the money to hire it out. Well, then don't do it at all now.
Or right. So either you forget about it and you move on with other pieces of your business, right? Or you farm it out and delegate it to like an outside vendor.
Yeah,
right?
If you can afford to do that.
Or if you can afford to do it. Or you fix it yourself and you find some way to do it internally by hiring an intern or doing a cheaper version of it.
I think the point is though, not because people are like, so fix it or find someone else to fix it or forget about it. Like, why is this deep? The point isn't actually handling the problem. The point is making a decision and moving along from there.
It's the indecision that stops us. It's the analysis paralysis of really smart people that we talked about earlier, right? What comes along with being super smart is that you overthink everything.
Better at rationalizing things or rationalizing indecision. Better at coming up with reasons not to do something that you're scared of.
Right. And figuring out systems that you won't allow yourself to sit there and overthink it to a place of analysis paralysis where you don't do anything. And then time goes by and life goes by and you're nowhere better off, you're nowhere further along. So these are simple systems and solutions. This is not supposed to be war and peace here, okay? Yeah. This is not Nouriel Roubini's Economist, mega threats. This is a book about people who everyday people, everybody's the same at the end of the day, right? We have certain goals we're trying to achieve. We're trying to live the best life. We're trying to live a life that's rich, which is, to me, a rich life isn't just about having a lot of money. It's about really having like meaningful relationships and being satiated with the time you have on earth, right? So let's not count ourselves out. Let's figure out ways, simple solutions, simple systems that can get us there. And that's why I did this.
Got an interesting gratitude story exercise. And normally I hate stuff like this because it's so cheesy. But this one's from Andrew Huberman. Everybody loves Andrew Huberman now.
Everybody loves Andrew Huberman.
So
that's why I included it.
Yeah, tell me about this because, again, most gratitude stuff is sort of barf
I
and
agree
cliche,
with you.
But this one seems to be scientific, or at least from a scientist.
Well, yeah, at least from a neuroscientist.
From a scientist, if not scientific itself.
It's funny, when I do my podcast too, right? I always ask people, like, what are the habits? Like, what do you do every day that really kind of like optimize your life and optimize your health? Like, tell me what you do in the morning, right? 9 out of 10 people say to me, or actually 10 out of 10 people, to be honest, say either meditation or they say, or they say like a gratitude journal, right? I've heard it so many times.
I almost don't believe people do that.
So my point is, at nauseum, I hear the same things. I'm a believer. I actually truly believe that people are saying a lot of these things because it sounds good. And
For sure they are.
And because it's a very popular hashtag. It's a very trendy hashtag. You know, I journal, I meditate, Like, I don't think there's any real authenticity to the majority of that. No. I think it's baloney.
A lot of the guys who say make your bed in the morning, I'm like, you're a billionaire. You're making your own bed? Right. I don't believe you.
Exactly.
First thing you stopped doing when you got rich is make your own bed.
100%. But at least but maybe they mean their bed is being made, or like it's like a made bed.
I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this one.
It's a made bed.
Yeah.
My point of saying all this about the gratitude journal is like, A, I don't necessarily believe that people actually do it.
Right.
And B, I'm not necessarily convinced that that is the reason for people who do it, that it actually changes their psychology and their mental idea, and like doesn't really create more productivity for them.
Yeah, sure.
Right. But I do believe there's something to be said about being happy with what you have and feeling like fulfilled. So I saw this thing with Andrew Huberman, and he like made some really good points about really how do people feel gratitude? Like, what is the thing that make people feel full? And he had a spin on it that I thought was very different, interesting, which was like when you talk to people and do something for somebody, it makes them, it gives you a sense of gratitude or fulfillment.
So when you do something for someone else.
Yes.
Okay.
And speak about, like, say, I'm doing this for you, and therefore I feel gratitude for that. It lacked the writing in a journal, like 10 things that I'm happy for. And by the way, when you write something, 10 things, today I wrote, I'm happy for my children. I'm happy for my podcast with Jordan. I'm happy for What do I write tomorrow? The same, like, I'm happy. Like, I feel it's a little trite.
Yeah, I agree.
For me.
That's why I never really got into that.
Right. But how do you feel? I'm just going to like take it to a human level, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I know for me, like if I was able to do something for you that really kind of helped and benefited you in some way, and, you know, it makes me feel good.
Yeah,
that makes me feel like, oh, I actually like made a difference. I like helped so-and-so. Sure. And that's like a true feeling, an emotion that I can like live with, that kind of carries me further.
Okay.
That's the point of why I wrote it.
So that's the idea.
That's the idea.
Huberman's gratitude exercise is not think of the things you're grateful for, but do something that someone else should be grateful for.
Do something that makes you feel grateful by doing something for somebody else and by basically doing something.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it's certainly better than just thinking about why your life is good, I suppose.
Or it's not. It's just like, it seems to me like over time, like let's say you did that once or twice, but then over time, it would seem like it may get a little repetitive in your brain, where maybe I'm a big habit person, and maybe it does change maybe the neuroplasticity. But I think that to me is a very overused, one-dimensional way of really feeling grateful.
Sure.
And a habit that's been talked about a lot, and that I'm not really necessarily sure that just because people say they do it all the time, that it actually is that beneficial.
Yeah, I agree with that. We do have the challenge of beating our brain at negative thoughts. I think you said we have 6,200 thoughts per day, 80% of which are negative, which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of thoughts, and that's a lot of negative thoughts. I'm not even. Do you know where that data came from? Because that's a lot of negative thoughts.
You can Google it right now.
I believe it. Yeah. It's true that it's true. It's crazy.
That is actually a very common piece of data that's been talked about a lot. There's a lot of research about 6,200 thoughts a day. 80% of them are negative. You're much more subconscious to them.
It's a little depressing to think that that's how many negative thoughts I have per day. It's like 4,500 or whatever the math works out to be.
Like, just think about just between now and when you had your sugarfish lunch, how many thoughts you were thinking of. Just like little things that you didn't even think about, like how you had 5 crab hand rolls and you're going to be cut off and this, and like, buy this, or like,
I do get cut off at Sugarfish is a sushi place nearby here in Los Angeles that I always go to, and I get cut off on the amount of blue crab hand rolls that I'm allowed to order, because apparently there's a shortage and they don't want some schlub eating like 10 in one sitting.
I've never heard that in my life.
Apparently my money's not green enough for Sugarfish to have unlimited blue crab hand rolls. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Remember, you can also enjoy The Jordan Harbinger Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our podcast feed is a treasure trove of insights from intellectuals, authors, spies, artists, athletes, pioneers, engineers, former mafia bosses, and business leaders, all sharing their secrets to success. For more information, click the link in the description. Now, back to the show. Look, I'm pretty good at catastrophizing. I'm pretty good at negative thoughts. It's definitely been a journey for me. You give the example in the book of Amanda Knox, who's been on this show as well. I'll look up the episode number while you tell me this example. But she did some sort of negative visualization that was somehow different.
Yeah, well, she was on my podcast, and I found that podcast to be really interesting. Here's a girl who has been exonerated, right, for the murder of those two people in Italy.
Right, this is a girl whose roommate got murdered. She went to prison in Italy for, I think, 4 years. Mm-hmm. And then it turned out that she didn't do it. It
turns out she got exonerated for doing it. Yeah. But they kept her in. And by the way, she was very young. She was 18 years old.
Yeah.
And so she was kept in an Italian prison. And so my question to her was, how did you kind of get through it? And she had this exercise where she thought of like the worst thing that she could be, or where she could be, what the worst thing that could have happened, or where she could be, and then compare it to where she was right there in life. And it made her feel better. And I think, what did I call that in the book? I called it
negative visualization.
Negative visualization. And so when she was telling me the story, I was like, this is really interesting, because here you are in jail. Like, how much worse can it be, right? But you can always find a situation that's way worse than where you are at that moment. And when you do, and when you think of that, and then you come back to where you really are in life, it kind of it's a calming effect. And so when she told me that story, I went like down the rabbit hole and started talking to different psychologists and different people and asking them about this. Like, is this actually a thing? Is this a true thing? Like, is this something that people can do?
It sort of sounds like the opposite of what you should be doing. What's the worst thing that can happen? Like, don't think about that. That's hasn't happened yet. Why are you worrying about that?
Well, yeah, especially if you're in jail, right? Like
in an Italian prison for murder that you didn't commit.
Right. Like, how much, I was riveted by it. I'm like, well, how much worse can it be? And then she started talking about these things that, like, she starts like, well, I could be, getting raped in a jail, like whatever it was, you know what I mean? You can take whatever your situation is and then make it that you can create so much, like, it can always be so much worse that when you come back to the reality, it doesn't seem as bad. And so, like I said to you, when she was telling me this, and it was like a long conversation that they can find on my podcast too, if they want.
We'll link to it in the show notes. Episode 386 of the Jordan Harbinger Show.
Okay.
In case people care to go back to it.
That basically that when I went down that rabbit hole and I spoke to different psychologists and they told me this was actually a thing that really helped and worked, I was fascinated by it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's surprising because it almost seems like you, again, should not necessarily be thinking about the worst things that can happen. But I suppose what it does is contrast your actual situation with something else.
Yes, the point is it can always be worse, and so with that situation. But anything can always be worse. So kind of bring yourself back to that. But what I was saying is, if you can go into a situation of like, what is the worst that can happen, then it should preempt you to at least make the attempt. Make the attempt at whatever it is that you want.
Tell me about limbic friction. I never heard this term before.
Oh my, you never did?
No.
Oh my God. So oh my God.
Do you need to go to the book and reread that chapter?
No, I know limbic friction. It's putting certain habits or things in place so that you can do the things that you need to do.
Okay, give me an example.
So like, for example, if you want to work out in the morning, right? Put a yoga mat in front of you, like in the morning. So basically, or put your shoes and your shirts, in front of you, or like put
on the floor.
So then it's a reminder or a habit, so that it will cause a reaction for you to do what you need to do.
Like sleeping in your workout running clothes. So
I wouldn't be sleeping in my workout clothes, but yeah,
whatever.
But
you don't need to.
Yeah,
some people do.
Do you sleep in workout clothes?
No, I don't need to. But I remember when I started running in Michigan in the winter, I was like, oh God, I really don't want to go. It's still dark outside. This sucks. So I slept in my running clothes, not the jackets and stuff, but I slept in them, and I would get up and go, well, I don't even have to get cold until I go outside because I don't even have to change. So then I would just go and put my shoes on and walk outside. And I gave myself permission to go walk outside. And if it was too cold, come back in, but then you're already outside.
Then you're already outside.
Yeah.
The idea is to give yourself, put habits in place or put things in place for you to do what you need to do. I also, and you're going to yawn when I say this because I know your personality. Even if you're not yawning on the outside, you're going to be yawning on the inside. Okay. But it's kind of like do the hard things first. So you can, first thing, so you can get other things taken care of. So because what happens is the brain energy that you use, the things that you have to do later on is a lot of brain energy. So if you can do those things, the hard things first, or do something hard in the morning, it really helps you with your productivity later on.
Interesting. So what's that book, Eat That Frog, where you do the hardest project of your day first?
Because
also
your
momentum.
It builds momentum. And the other thing about the frog, the other thing is we are the most alert and we have the most energy first thing. So like as the day goes on, it gets harder and harder to have the motivation, let's say, I hate that word, but motivation to kind of do these things. So if you take it off your checklist, there's a lot of different compounds in different ways.
That makes sense. If I don't know how to do something, I always have to figure it out in the morning. Because if I go, I'll do that later, then it's 4 p.m. and I have time to do it. I'm like, I don't want to figure this crap out right now. I'm freaking tired already.
And you're exhausted.
Yeah.
But also, once you get those the other thing is, if you do those things, it gives you a feeling of accomplishment to help you get through to the next things. And then it doesn't take up the brain power of what you need to get done later on.
Yeah, this is like some James Clear stuff, I think.
A little bit.
Well, adjacent
it's
to...
not, by the way, like when you say it's a James Clear stuff, like he didn't make it up. Nobody,
no. Well, yeah, okay, fine.
It's like he didn't create it. And like, Daniel Pink or whoever, I think these are things that are very useful tactics that people have packaged in a way that like makes sense to whoever they're speaking to. In
one of the best-selling books of the decade, James Clear, episode 108.
Oh yeah. By the way, that is the best book of the decade. I mean, that book is still in number one. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, he's eating down on that for the rest of his life.
Oh, 100%. Although like the subtle art of not giving a is up there too, right?
It is.
It's like 20 million books sold.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy knowing those guys before they even wrote those books and being like, oh, these guys are pretty smart. Now I'm like, dang.
I know, right?
Look at that. Knowing all these super smart people. Usually you meet people after they're famous.
Yeah, that's
Usually
true.
Don't meet people when they're
Did you think they were so smart before?
I did.
Both of them?
But they're bloggers.
They're bloggers.
So I thought, these guys are interesting. Yeah, I was like, they're interesting guys. I just had Mark on my podcast recently. He's I liked him. He's very nice. They're all really good dudes. They're all really, really good dudes that deserve their success, in my opinion. Anyway.
We digress.
Yes, but we digress. Choose a direction, not a destination. This is a really good point because it's really it's very easy to get demotivated if you choose an outcome versus choosing a direction to go in, because you can always, to use weight loss as an example, if you say I'm going to lose 30 pounds and you only lose 10, then you're like, oh crap, I failed. Mm-hmm. But if you just, what I did was decided I was going to lose a little bit of fat. That was it. That was as sort of basic, as much as I just want the line go down. That was all I was thinking. It didn't matter how long it took, anything. As long as the line was going down every week by like 0.1 pounds. Yeah. Most weeks, I should say, over an average of each month, then I'm happy. And I did that and I lost 40 pounds of fat in 8 months. And we talked about this when we saw each other earlier today. I wasn't fat before, but I just had weight to lose, and then my blood pressure went down. That was why I did it.
Really?
My blood pressure was kind of high. And they were like, oh, you should take these medication. And my other doctor was like, no. And I thought, do I need to lose weight? And he's like, I guess you could, but you're not really overweight. I lost fat, just happened to work.
That's actually funny that you said that. I was just going to say that, you weren't fat before.
No, I wasn't.
But yet when I look at you, you don't, at 40 pounds lighter, you don't look like you're like skin and bones.
No. Mm-mm.
Which is so weird, right?
My face changed shape a little bit. My body changed shape a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
But if you look at the before and after, you're like, okay. But then you think, that's 15 pounds.
I was going to say.
Not 40 pounds. Not 40 pounds.
That's crazy.
It just shows you how much fat was between my organs. I know this is a disgusting conversation.
No. I think it's actually very interesting. For me, it's very fascinating, and I love it because Exactly
Most
true.
people think fat is on your belly and hangs over your belt. They don't realize that it pushes on your kidneys, your liver, your spleen, your stomach, your heart.
But you didn't look like you had that, like, even internal fat.
I hid it really well, I guess. And I didn't know that either, but I must have because I lost 40 pounds of fat.
And you weren't eating crazy either.
No.
And you walk all the time?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Really crazy. And I'm way stronger now, too, of course, because I've been working out.
Well, yeah.
So the idea was choose a direction and not a destination.
Yes.
And then you don't get demotivated. And it's the same thing with a business. Yes, you need goals or something to shoot for, but you do mostly need a direction, especially when it comes to personal goals that are hard to measure. Like, I didn't know I was going to lose 40 pounds, but if I'd said 10, I could have stopped way too early. I just chose the direction and not the destination.
100%. So that's where people get, a lot of times they get stuck again,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Because they don't know exactly what it is, and then they put a lot of pressure, and it becomes very like anxiety. Oh my God, I don't know, and so they don't do again. It's about not doing anything. The momentum piece is so huge, right? Something in motion stays in motion. Something stagnant stays stagnant. So that's why if you just pick a direction, right? Not the destination. You're at least on the path of motion and on the path of action to get you a little closer to whatever that is. Like, a lot of times in life, Jordan, I mean, in my life especially, I'm sure in a lot of people's lives, them just doing something got them, to a place where, an opportunity or a place that they otherwise never would have even known about because they were at least like doing something, right? Versus just sitting still and not making anything. So, like,
it's that luck favors the prepared type of thing. Or what is it? Luck meets
actually,
something with luck.
Actually,
meets
fortune favors the bold.
Yeah, is that how you translate
fortune
it? There's
favors the bold.
Debate over that. Is that in your book?
No, but it's not in my book. But I do a speaking thing all the time about this for salespeople.
No, yeah.
I mean, fortune does favor the bold, I think, and that's an actual very popular cliche that I'm sure you'd like to know.
I put that on my Facebook back in law school. It was very like 2006 dude bro finance guy. Fortune favors the bold, and my wife saw that. She's like, "Can you take that off? That just looks douchey."
I mean, but I don't think I don't think it's very douchey at all. I think it's factual and true. And the funny thing is, I believe it, and I think it's actually something that is accurate.
Connecting the dots with our experiences and seeing how they have led to good things. Tell me about this.
Connecting the dots.
This is so good because I realize most of recognizing victories and things that motivate me is me looking backwards and thinking like, oh, actually this led to this, led to this, led to this, all of which I thought were kind of bad things at first and turned out to be, at the time, and turned out to be some of the best things that ever happened to me. Like the story I've told on the show a zillion times about separating from my previous business, essentially getting fired. And then it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I have to start over. And now it's like, oh, thank God I got fired and started over. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Exactly. So it's usually a lot of times your biggest failures or your biggest letdowns become your biggest successes. And so you don't know at the moment how they're all the dots connect, but they all kind of find a way to connect at the end or when you look back. Exactly what you just said.
And it is true that looking at, anyway, I love the idea of looking at the dots only in retrospect, knowing what they mean. That's, I think, very insightful and comes with life experience. The other thing that occurred to me when reading this was a lot of people want to protect us from failure. So your mom might not want you to go out and do something because if it fails, then you'll feel bad and she wants to protect you from that feeling. And the same thing can happen. Good friends, parents, spouses can try to convince us not to do something because they don't want us to fall on our faces because they'll feel bad for us, not because they don't think we can do it, but because they don't want to see us get hurt. But it can really keep us from achieving our goals or doing something that we think we should be doing. I mean, a lot of people told me not to start my own business. They were like, you are a lawyer. What are you doing?
Right.
Are you stupid?
Do the safe route.
Do the safe thing. Or also, you know how many businesses fail? You have a 1 in 3 chance of even making it a few years doing this, let alone making money. You have you already have a Wall Street job paying more than you ever thought you were going to make. What are you doing? And that was actually pretty good advice. I just didn't follow it. Thankfully.
Right. Thankfully.
So the idea was we don't know the people's motivations who tell us not to do something. And sometimes they also don't know their motivations. They might have selfish motivations where they don't want to see us succeed because it means something for them. Like maybe you don't want your brother to succeed at something because it makes you look like a loser. Right. That's a thing. or maybe because they're too chicken to be bold themselves or haven't found the willpower, or because they don't want to see us fall on our face. So since we can't guess at their motivations, the best thing to do is to be bold, in your words.
No, what I think what you're referring to is the fact that you got to be very conscientious, careful of who you seek advice from, because you don't know what their reasons are for giving. They can have the best intentions a lot of times, but some people don't have the best intentions. But you don't want to seek advice from people who don't have the experience or the wherewithal to even know what that would be like. And a lot of times in life, we seek advice from someone who's never done it themselves, who have no clue. And then we decide on our direction and what we're going to do based on somebody else's
insecurities or
inexperience or insecurities or fear or whatever. And then our life is now created based on that thing. So what I talk about is the idea of creating this board of directors around you, as opposed to the board of directors, where
we get it.
Just for those at home who don't know, where the idea, of course, is to create a group where you're confident that they have the right reasons, they have the right experience, they want to see you succeed and win. They've already done it before, and you're curating this group of people who you seek advice from.
It's having a panel of folks around you whose advice you can trust and know that their intentions are usually going to be good because you've curated them in the first place, instead of just asking random people that you're close to give you advice.
But also people who have had the experience before.
I see.
That's the other thing. Not just, and being, like I said, people may have a really good intent. A lot of times people have good intentions. Like my mom would have a good intention, but she's so scared of her own shadow in a lot of ways. She would never take a risk, right? Like for you, when you left law and you did the stuff that you're doing now, you did it even though people told you not to.
Everyone told me not to.
Right.
Yeah.
So then why did you do it? Was there one person that said, go for it?
Not Gary Vaynerchuk, which is funny because this is way before he was famous.
Really?
Way before he was famous.
Okay, what happened?
YouTube didn't exist at the time.
What year was this?
2007.
Okay, and what happened?
Like that. I went and met him somewhere, and I was like, who's this guy? The wine guy? And we were just talking and hanging out, and he was like, you know how Gary Vaynerchuk is now. He was not even close to how he is now. Where he's like, oh, you can do it. Come on, guys. F-bomb every third word. He was not like that, but he was
how was he? Because I remember him from the Today Show. Him and I did a bunch of segments together. He was selling wine, and I was selling something else.
Sure. Yeah, no, he just told me that the digital stuff was really going to be on the come up, and there's going to basically that influencers were going to exist at some point.
He told you that?
Yeah, he didn't put it in those exact words, but he's like, look, you have the nascent beginning of this. Podcasting is going to be huge. Digital is going to be huge. There's going to be a way for you to make a full-time living doing this. We're talking about 16 years ago now.
How did he know, I wonder, back then?
Well, he was all over Vidler doing winelibrary.tv.
So he was selling online wine.
Right.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and he's like, you're selling online dating stuff. It's a thing. It's a real thing. So, yeah, for people who don't know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, Gary V, sort of this zany online personality.
They'll know.
I love some of these examples of you being bold and getting something that most people would probably not bother doing. The email mix-up story and how that essentially got you a job at Forbes before Forbes was a joke of a click farm.
Yes. Well, I want to start by saying this is a testament to curiosity more than anything, which I think curiosity is a sister or a brother to being bold. I think that when you're curious, it opens up it opens up your mind to opportunities and communication and all sorts of connectedness. And so when you combine the curiosity with the boldness, it's a really nice blend. And what the story that you're talking about is I got an email randomly from some guy who, what happened was he was trying to send an email to a Jennifer Cohen, but he forgot Jennifer Cohen or.
Really? That's how easy that was?
That's how easy it was. And so I got the email instead of this guy who was sending it to his agent who had a manuscript he was handing in. And so when I got this email, instead of just deleting it like most people would do, I was very curious about who he was. And I was like, who is this guy? And like, what is he sending me? And I was looking at it. And then I was very interested in what this was. And I can tell it wasn't just like it was like it was an important email. And so his signature at the bottom of the email. Mm-hmm. And instead of just deleting the email and moving on, I called him. I said, hey, you sent me, my name is Jennifer. You sent me an email by accident. I think you meant to somebody else. We ended up like having a 45-minute conversation where I was asking him about his like what he does and manuscript and blah, blah, blah. He was answering me. We started talking about what I do. And I gave him an idea. Like one of the things that he did, he was like a New York Times author, like he was a political author, and was like a big political person, like an analyst. He also worked for Forbes. And I pitched him this idea that I thought of where I can do wellness. I could write a wellness topic or wellness column for entrepreneurs and executives for Forbes. And I pitched this random dude this idea. And he kind of was like, who is this girl? Whatever. But I got to him, in the conversation led me to him giving me his editor at Forbes. And with a little cajoling and, whatever else, I ended up talking to the editor. The editor was a hard sell. Again, these are very conservative people who I was speaking with.
You were
I was like, I was a young kid.
Yeah.
I wasn't a kid, but I was a young adult.
Sure.
Who's never really written that much at all in my life.
Your last job was at the Olive Garden.
Yeah, that was it when I was 12, but close. Yeah, so I had a few jobs in between, but close enough. But I was very audacious, and I basically just pitched this idea, even though they thought I was weird and it completely just not even experienced. Finally, the guy was like, I said to the guy, the editor of this other guy, you know what? I will do it for free. Let me write one column for free and see how it does. And, you don't have to pay me, blah, blah, blah. And he gave me a shot after a lot of cajoling, like I said. And that article ended up being the most viewed online of that week, of that month, maybe still, who knows. Wow. And one article turned into 2, that turned into 3. And then I got my own column in leadership at Forbes, which then of course opened a lot of other doors and opportunities that I would otherwise never have gotten if I didn't respond to that one email. So talking about
that wasn't addressed to you.
That wasn't even addressed to me, right? Was not addressed to me. But that's about connecting the dots, right? Because I had another thing failed where I wouldn't have even had the opportunity to even do that if that was not even the case. Mm-hmm. But more than that, it's about letting curiosity, creating your own opportunities through curiosity.
What percentage of that is I'm bold, and what percentage of that is I'm naive enough where I don't understand that this might have negative consequences? Not that there were in this particular case, but in some cases, it's better to almost be blissfully ignorant of, you can't do this. This could be bad for you or whatever.
Well, I think most
of the time that's not true.
Yeah,
right?
It's not really bad. I'm not putting myself in arm's length of any situation where it's dangerous.
Right.
But I will say that, and I have a whole chapter on naivety, because naivety is a strength in my opinion. I believe that naivety is one of your best, if you have, it's a great asset. It is a superpower, because the less you know, truthfully, the less you know, the better. Because the more experience you have, the more seasoned you are at doing something, that's when you really tend to overthink of all the things that have been done already, or how you don't make a difference, or you can never really figure out different ways of systems, because it seems like, why can you make a difference, or why this or why that? And you kind of, again, you talk yourself out of all the reasons why you should not do something. But when you're naive.
Well, it's start a podcast.
Why not?
Well, it's never going to get anywhere, but you don't know that because you're naive. So you just do it. And suddenly it's one of the biggest podcasts in the world. Absolutely.
And you don't know all the work that goes into it. You learn these things while you're doing something. Right. And so that's the whole idea, is let naivety be your superpower. If you don't know something, don't let that stop you from at least attempting and trying.
Not knowing what you're getting into can be good, because you don't then talk yourself out of that course of action.
Basically, yes.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I used to research. I still research things a lot, obviously, even for the show. But sometimes I stop doing it, though, because I don't want to know the workload necessarily that's going to be involved in something, or all the pitfalls. I want to just solve the problem when I get to that. And usually I'll hire a vendor to get me through something, and they're like, do you want an outline of the whole process? And sometimes I don't, because I don't want to get overwhelmed with all the things that can go wrong. I don't want to lose 3 nights of sleep thinking about my YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
If they know they can get me through that, then I'll just trust them to do that in the moment when the problem arises. you don't know why you don't know why something is supposedly impossible. And so you simply go and do that.
Exactly. And that's sometimes when the best projects, disruptors happen.
Tell me about, was it Jewel that was in your book? She had like
Jewel's another way.
She was known as somebody who like couldn't do, or
no,
tell me the story.
Kind of like, she was bold because and that's not really about the curiosity thing, but I guess she was curious enough to research a way where they offered her a contract. She was young and very inexperienced. And she didn't like the way a contract was. I think that, I don't know what area of the book it was in, but I would say that
towards the end.
She was curious, and she figured out a better way around it, where she bold enough to recreate a contract that they offered her, where she would end up making way more money, way more than what people usually get taken advantage of in the music, right? Because they like prey on people who don't know what they don't know and who really want something bad enough. Like that's what happens when you are so desperate for something to happen. A lot of times, that's when you can get away with a lot of things, and she used to do that, and so she figured out a way to create a contract that was way monetarily way more beneficial for her. And she was curious and she was bold. And so I used her as an example of someone who really utilized these strengths.
Isn't Branson kind of like that too?
Branson's
Starts a million companies. Yeah. But also he just
when he started like, let's create like a rocket. Like, I mean, like a spaceship.
Hey, you can't do that. It's too hard. ... Got a space company.
Right. And he doesn't know, like, to my point, the people who know the least about something are the ones who succeed in it a lot of times, because they're not letting the idea of like not knowing bog them down. They're gonna first, what's that thing, like ready, shoot, aim.
You've done really well at finding which talents you have and carving out a niche using those same talents. And there's more about this in the book, so we don't have to break down the whole thing. But I mean, training celebrities to stay fit for music tours specifically is a really interesting narrow niche that you basically invented, didn't you?
Basically, yeah. So the truth of the matter is, I'm a big believer in creating your own opportunities and not letting what's in front of you be your stop and start. Mm-hmm. Again, this is
why you always order off the menu when we go to dinner.
This is why I always.
This is like a metaphor for your whole life.
This whole thing is a metaphor for my entire life, right? I was not somebody who was ever a fitness person. I wasn't somebody who went to school to be in nutrition or fitness, right? Like that wasn't what I was doing. At the time I was working at a record label, and I moved to LA based on, I got a visa, like a working visa through Sony, because I was fast tracking in the marketing. Right. I'm Canadian. I was at BMG. I got a great job offer to come here to Los Angeles. And I was like running marketing at a very young age and creating all these like marketing initiatives, blah, 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 for bands. And, I decided I got burnt out. I didn't want to be in the music world anymore. And so because I was here young, very young, and on someone else's visa, I couldn't make money any other way. So I figured, okay, what am I going to do to kind of make some money so I can last in the States? I can live and last in the United States, eat, and kind of not get kicked out. I'm like, I thought I'll become a personal trainer. That way I can make some extra money. I like it. I like working out. Didn't know anything about it. I'm like, I like to ride my bike and I like aerobics. So let's do it.
Aerobics.
I mean,
putting a timestamp on this thing.
Yeah. That's why I said
Spinning didn't exist.
I said it. Well, that did actually exist.
Did it?
Yeah, it did exist.
All right, fine. Anyway, not the point.
It just it's had a resurgence. But anyway, so like I'll just do that. So I quit my job, got like my first training certificate. And I'm like, all right, maybe I'll just do this. And while I was going through my training certification, it dawned on me, listen, I have all these relationships in the music world, right? I've been there for 5 years working in the music world. I know a lot of different people.
That's a long time, yeah.
A long time. And there's transferable skills that you can use. That doesn't have to be, you could be selling, doesn't matter what industry you're in, these are transferable. I can use them somewhere else. So I thought to myself, okay, I know all these people. So I went and I got a meeting with the head of MCA Universal, a friend who I knew, like a work friend of mine. Yeah. And I said, listen, you know what? I have a proposition for you. I want to become a trainer for the record label, but I didn't want to be hourly, right? Because that's why I thought of this thing while I was doing great personal training. Because I knew that I would be capped at like making whatever it was an hour, right? Like there'd be a ceiling. How many hours I worked versus how much money I would make. I suggested we I was like, put me on retainer, give me a certain amount of money, and I will train all the different talent for when they and I literally thought of like when they go on tour or when they do a music video, and I will train them. He looked at me, he's like, what the hell do you know about training, personal training? I'm like, well, I got my certification. I know how to do a lunge. I know how to do a push-up. Give me a shot.
The bar is so low
right?
here.
But it's about having the audacity and the boldness to think, why not me? Why not? Like, what's the worst that can happen? He kicks me out and says, sorry, we're not going to give you the money.
Yeah.
We don't want to do it. Just go, move on, lady. He finally said, okay, you know what? Sorry. He says, you know what? I'll give you a shot. Let's do it for a month. Let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. And from that opportunity, 1 month turned into many months, and one label turned into multiple labels, turned into multiple people working underneath an entire fitness business and industry that kind of wasn't really there at the time. And I was training literally everybody for tours and videos. And now I became this like fitness influencer.
The first celebrity trainer.
No, not as like, I don't ever say that. But what I say is like, I created this position for myself that otherwise wouldn't have existed. I would have been basically shipped back to Canada if I didn't think of this opportunity for myself, which then, by the way, took me on an entirely different trajectory of my life, where then I became a health and fitness person, which, by the way, was, like I said, nothing that I would have ever thought, 5 years from that moment, before then or whatever.
You do a really good job of, in the book, you call it bundling your bold. And we won't go through the whole process here because it is good in the book, but we've been friends for a long time and you've done a lot of really incredible stuff and things in your life. And I know we've been wanting to do a show for a while. It's been hard to put what you do into a container. So it's actually really appropriate that you wrote a book about taking all of these random things that don't fit into a container and turning it into your career and your strength and your talents and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
100%.
It's like the perfect thing for you to do, because I'm like, what are you going to write a book about? You have all these disparate skills and talents that don't really necessarily neatly fit together. And
nope.
Hey, the book is about fitting all these disparate talents and skills that don't really neatly fit together and turning it into something special, a catalyst for something special.
It's like Seinfeld, but a book.
Okay. I mean, I guess.
It's just random things that kind of work together.
Yeah.
But I think that if you would look at my career, there is a lot of zig and zagging. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But at the same time, it makes a lot of sense, because what I've done, and I think I've done it okay, is really lean on the things that I'm really good at and figure those things out quickly, and then kind of compensate for the things I'm not good at. Like, I really believe that people need to figure out what they're good at, really lean hard into those strengths, and then go all in. I do believe that to be true.
Yeah, but you do it in a smart way that's not just sort of this reckless, quit your job and burn the ships.
Never.
And I appreciate that. I want to end with your Keanu Reeves story because I think it's really funny. And also, I would imagine, and also I think it's a good sort of metaphor or it's a good example of just doing something that is completely ridiculous and surprisingly getting a result.
And so when I was young, kind of to my whole music industry story, right? I did work for a record label. I loved music. Loved it. Like, that was one of my big passions. And I knew a lot about band and everything else. And I really wanted to like a video disc jockey, like a Carson Daly.
A VJ?
A VJ. Yeah. We call it. I mean, that sounds
video
funny.
disc jockey sounds super 90s.
Well, it was. It was like, it was. And by the way, it was like Carson Daly. That was like the TRL, remember?
Yeah.
So we had our own version in Canada, Much Music. And that was like the job that like every young teen wanted, right?
Sure,
It was the coolest job in the world. And they were having an open call for it at Much Music. And so I was like, oh my God, I need that job. And so at the time, Keanu Reeves was at the precipice of his career. I guess he still is. He's been at that precipice.
I mean, Keanu Reeves kind of never went out of style.
He never went out of style. It's unbelievable. But at the time, I was like, wow, this guy just did speed. It was like the biggest thing since sliced bread. And he was coming to Winnipeg to practice his acting chops with Shakespeare. He always wanted to do Shakespeare.
So random.
And I'm like, this is my, and I found out, and I'm like, this is my shot. This is my chance. I'm going to get Keanu Reeves be on my demo tape And that way, when they are going to look at that demo tape, if I can get Keanu Reeves on that demo tape,
they're going to be blown away.
They'll be blown away, and I'll for sure get the audition and get the job and blah, blah, blah. So I told all my friends, I told my family, I went to school. It was like, I'm going to do this. Everyone, of course, laughed at me. They're like, oh God, here she goes again. And what did I do? I coerced a girlfriend of mine to come with me. By the way, Winnipeg in the winter is minus 45. It's so cold. And I didn't care. I put on my warmest jacket and boots, and I sat outside of the theater, Manitoba Theater Center, for 45 minutes. My friend came with me. She lasted 7 minutes. She went home after 7 minutes. She's like, screw this. This is too cold. You're on your own. I waited and waited. Finally came out. And at the time when this was happening, it was like, do you remember like Current Affair and Hard Copy and all the like Entertainment Tonight magazines?
Crappy, like tabloid
all
shows.
They were all waiting for him, right? And all the other shows too, like I said, Entertainment Tonight and all those like gossipy entertainment shows. And I saw, and all the girls were waiting for him. I was so determined. And I saw him come out, and I walked right up to him. I went through the crowd, and I tapped him on the shoulder. And he finally looked at me, and he's like, I know you want an autograph. I'm like, no, I don't want an autograph. I really need your help. I need to make this demo tape because I have this job that I really want.
He must have been like, oh, for crying out loud.
He looked at me confused, like, What are you talking about? And I'm like totally stunned. And I'm like, I said it again and I said it again. And this girl's pushing me out of the way. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but write down your phone number on like a piece of paper and I'll call you. And I was like, come on, you're not really going to call me. And I was like, I'm like, you're not really going to call me. Like, I know I'm not that like naive.
Right.
And he's like, just do it. And so I'm like, all right, well, I had no paper and pen. So some girl gave me an eyeliner. I found a gum wrapper. I wrote my phone number down.
Really?
Gave it to him. Went home.
He's like, you expect me to put this soggy eyeliner gum wrapper that's covered in Manitoba snow in my pocket?
He did.
Yeah, and he did.
And
Lord.
I went back to school. I told my friends. Everyone was laughing at me. I was like the laughing stock. I'd walk around. They're like, oh, did Keanu call? Ha ha. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days go by. The fourth day, come home. My mom says, hey, did you check the answering machine today yet? Because at the time we had answering machines. And I was like, no, why? She's like, well, you should check it. And so I go and press play. The first message I hear like, hello? And I hear my mother picking up, on that last ring, like, who is this? And then I hear, hi, is Jennifer home? And my mom's like, who's this? She's at school. Like either call back or leave a message. And she hung up on him.
Oh, my God.
Or a guy.
Yeah.
And then I hear the machine being like, beep again. And it's like, hi, this is Keanu Reeves calling. I met Jennifer, like 5 nights ago. You came up to me. You were asking me something. I don't know what it was, blah, blah, blah. Here's my phone number. Call me back. Imagine.
I can't even. This is ridiculous.
I was 18 years old. I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God. He left me a phone number. I called the phone number. Cut to.
The guy from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure called me back.
Cut to. I am the next 2 days later picking up Keanu Reeves in my mom's Cutlass Supreme.
Stop. He didn't get a ride on his own? This is a different era.
I pick him up at his hotel. My mom's Cutlass Supreme. I drive him back home to my house. My mom has lunch prepared for him. I have my friends all in different corners of my living room with their different like camcorders to film me basically interviewing Keanu
I'm sure
Reeves.
you had no shortage of volunteers to come and film.
No shortage.
Yeah.
And I had my boyfriend at the time or whatever.
I wouldn't have included him, but okay.
I didn't want to, but he was insistent. And I interviewed this guy for like half hours.
Wow.
And he was so gracious.
What a legend this guy is.
He's a legend. And then I, with my like no technical chops, edit the thing. I like go through 2 different VHSs and edit this tape together, send it into Much Music. Got the audition.
Promptly blew it.
And what?
And promptly blew it and did get the job.
I made it it came down to between me and another girl. Me and one other girl.
Yeah.
After thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And then the other girl got the job. But it doesn't matter. Like the job was so irrelevant because that was my
You still
moment.
have this VHS
Of course
tape?
I do. This was my I talk about this in my TED Talk.
How big is your hair in the tape?
Oh my God, you have to watch it. You got to watch my TED Talk.
I'm just going to watch the Keanu Reeves
You're going to watch
portion.
it. It is hilarious.
I
what
think
I'm
it's
wearing.
great that you got that.
And
Gosh.
to me, what it showed me wasn't about the job. Who cares about the job? It was that pivotal moment where I'm like, you know what? You never know unless you ask. And that to me was a sign. I'm like, you know what? Being bold is way more important than being smart, because it was so easy for me and my friends and my family to be like, you shouldn't do it. Why would you? He's not going to help you. It's too cold outside. Why would you wait? What was it going to happen? If I listened to all of that chatter, I would never have gotten that opportunity to prove to myself that it really is boldness that's the secret sauce. It's not how much talent you have. It's not about how smart you are or how pretty you are. It's about just going for it. And from that moment on, that's the lesson that I learned. And I, throughout my life, just went through that with gusto every time. I would always think, like, what's the worst that can happen? Never know. You never know. And to me, that's why that story was so, it was such a huge turning point in my life.
Sure. No, I can imagine. I think, so here's the thing. Everybody up to this point was, I'm not sure if I believe this story. And even I was like, if I didn't know you, I wouldn't be so sure about this story. But you have the tape. So we're going to link to that in the show notes then. We'll link to your TED Talk where you have a piece of the tape.
Yeah, I had me talking to him on my mom's sofa.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I also knew it was true because I met your mom and she verified it because I asked her about this a long time ago.
You know what? Exactly.
When you weren't in the room. Like, what? So how was Keanu Reeves? And she wasn't like, what?
Who? I'm telling you, my life, honestly, is like a weird combination of lots of stories like that.
That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because you're kind of like you're like a Forrest Gump character in many ways.
That's actually a lot of times what people say about me. Like I just kind of happen upon something just by sheer boldness, really, and audacity.
You come out the other side, and we're out of time because they're trying to leave. We're way over our time slot.
Oh shoot! Okay, well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for checking out this entire episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show. If you're interested in exploring this topic further, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show podcast feed. There, we dive even deeper on this and many other topics. In the audio podcast, I also close open loops, cover things discussed off camera, off air, and give some parting lessons from our guest. You can find The Jordan Harbinger Show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any podcast app, or at jordanharbinger.com. And also, if you found this episode useful, please share it with those you care about. Last but not least, like, comment, and subscribe.